Principles for Success, an ultra mini series adventure in 30 minutes and in 8 episodes. Episode 1, The Call to Adventure. Before we begin, let me just establish the fact that I don't know much relative to what I need to know. Whatever success I've had in life has more to do with my knowing how to deal with my not knowing than anything I know. That I should be telling other people what to do sounds kind of presumptuous to me, but I'm going to do it because I believe that the principles that have made me successful could help others achieve their own goals. I'm now at a stage in my own life in which it is much more important to me to pass along what I've learned about how to be successful than to seek more success for myself. What you choose to do with these principles is up to you. You have to be an independent thinker because only you can develop your own principles based on your own values. This brings me to my first and most fundamental principle, which is that you need to think for yourself about what is true. So let's get started. Early on, I discovered I needed principles. Principles are smart ways for handling things that happen over and over again in similar situations. There are principles for everything, from skiing to parenting to cooking and so on. I'm going to share some of my most important overarching life principles that influence how we approach everything that we do. I didn't start out with principles. I acquired them over a lifetime of experiences, mostly from making mistakes and reflecting on them. My life principles are simple, but they're not complete. I still struggle to make the best decisions, and I still make mistakes and learn new principles all the time. This is the reality. At the beginning, I needed to escape the conventions that surrounded me, which meant that I needed to think for myself. Unless you want to have a life that is directed by others, you need to decide for yourself what to do, and you need to have the courage to do it. But I didn't know that at first. I only learned that from going on my adventure. Looking back on my own journey, I now see that time is like a river that carries us forward into encounters with reality that require us to make decisions. We can't stop our movement down this river, and we can't avoid the encounters. We can only approach them in the best possible way. In your lifetime, you will face millions of decisions. The quality of your decisions will determine the quality of your life. Over the course of my lifetime, the most valuable things I've learned were the results of mistakes I reflected on to help form principles so I wouldn't make the same mistakes again. These principles took me from being a very ordinary middle-class kid from Long Island to becoming very successful as judged by conventional measures. They also gave me the meaningful work and meaningful relationships that I value even more than these conventional successes. People often ask me how I did it. I can assure you it wasn't because of my uniqueness as a person. It was the result of a unique approach to life I believe almost anybody can adopt. It starts with embracing reality and dealing with it. The path you take in life is your most important decision. In my case, I wanted my life to be great, and I feared boredom and mediocrity more than I feared failure. Since I didn't start out with money, and I didn't need much more than a bed to sleep in and food to eat, I could skew my decisions to pursue my adventures. So ever since I was a kid, I ran after the things I wanted, crashed, got up and ran again, and crashed again, and each time I crashed, I learned something, got better, and crashed less. By doing that over and over again, I learned to love this process, even the crashing part of it. Through it, I encountered reality, and I learned how to deal with it, which inspired another one of my most fundamental principles, which is that truth is the essential foundation for producing good outcomes. By truth, I don't mean anything more than the way the world works. I believe that we were given the laws of reality by nature. Humans didn't create them, but we can use them to foster our own evolution and achieve our goals. Realizing that made me a hyper-realist. By which I mean I became someone who has discovered the great rewards of deeply understanding, accepting, and working with reality as it is and not as I wish it would be. When I say I'm a hyper-realist, people sometimes think I'm saying that dreams can't come true. That's absolutely not true. Without pursuing dreams, life is mundane. What I mean is that, to me, hyperrealism is the best way to choose one's dreams and then achieve them. Having big dreams, plus embracing reality, plus having lots of determination, will bring you a successful life. I believe this formula is true for everyone. But what does a successful life look like? We each have to decide for ourselves what success is. I don't care whether you want to be a master of the universe or to live under a palm tree or anything else. I really don't. Each of us chooses goals based on our values and decides on the best path to achieve them. But we all need approaches to making decisions that work well, especially when facing problems, mistakes, and weaknesses that stand in our way. To succeed, we must embrace all our realities, especially the harsh realities that we wish weren't true. At first, looking at these harsh realities caused me a lot of pain, but I learned that this pain was just psychological, and that my seeing things differently made all the difference. I came to view problems like puzzles that would reward me if I could solve them. Another life was coming your way, and they
Your opponent is using their main character.
Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! Final round. Fight! You win! Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! You win!
They will give me principles for dealing with similar problems in the future. I learned to treat pain as a cue that
successfully
a
blocked
great
the
learning
opponent's
opportunity
rank
is
up.
at hand, which led me to realize that pain plus reflection equals progress. Meditation has been invaluable in helping me see things that way. I found that when I calmed myself down and embraced my realities and dealt with them, the rewards brought me pleasure and the pain faded. Each of us has the unique capability to think logically, to reflect on ourselves and our circumstances, and to direct our own personal evolution. Doing this well is just a matter of following a simple 5-step process. We've discussed how important it is to reflect carefully after experiencing pain. When I did this, I was usually able to discover principles that would prevent me from repeating the same mistakes in the future. And I could see that being successful simply consisted of 5 steps. Step 1 is to know your goals and run after them. What is best for you depends on your nature, so you need to really understand yourself and know what you want to achieve in life. Step 2 is to encounter the problems that stand in the way of getting to your goals. These problems are typically painful. If handled badly, some of them can lead to your ruin. But to evolve, you need to identify those problems and not tolerate them. Step 3 is to diagnose these problems to get at their root causes. Don't jump too quickly to solutions. Take a step back and reflect in order to really distinguish the symptoms from the disease. Step 4 is to design a plan to eliminate the problems. This is where you will determine what you need to do to get around them. And step 5 is to execute those designs, pushing yourself to do what's needed to progress toward your goal. A successful life essentially consists of doing these 5 steps over and over again. This is your personal evolution, and you see this process everywhere. It's just a law of nature. Think of any product, any organization, or any person you know, and you will see that this is true for them. Evolution is simply a process of either adapting or dying. Conceptually, it looks just like the 5-step process I've described. As you push through this often painful process, you'll naturally ascend to higher and higher levels of success. I found that when I did it better, my struggling never became easier, because the more capable I became, the greater the challenges I would take on. Because different people are strong and weak at different things, most people can't do all 5 steps well. Not facing this reality means you could stretch further than you should. And as the heights get greater, your falls could also be greater. Sometimes terrible things happen to all of us in life. They can ruin us, or they can profoundly improve us, depending on how we handle them. Something like this happened to me in 1982. We progress forward until we encounter setbacks. Whether or not we get out of them and continue forward or spiral downward depends on whether or not we're willing to face the failure objectively and make the right decisions. Another life is coming your way.
Your opponent is using their main character.
Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! Hadouken! You win! Round one. Fight! Hadouken! Hadouken! Round two. Fight!
Something terrible happened to me in 1982 when I bet everything on a depression that never came. The period between 1979 and 1982 was one of extreme turbulence for the global economy, the markets, and for me. And I believed that the U.S. economy, with the world economy tied to it, was headed toward a catastrophe. This view was extremely controversial. I wanted the great upside, and very publicly said another fight was coming our way. After a delay, the stock market began a big bull market that lasted 18 years, and the U.S. economy enjoyed the greatest growth period in its history. This experience was like a blow to my head with a baseball bat. I had to cut my losses so that my company, Bridgewater, was left with one employee. I was so broke, I had to borrow
Win this
$1,000
battle,
from my dad
and
to
you'll
pay my
have a
bills.
5-win streak
But even
in
worse
ranked
was
match.
having to let go.
Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! You win!
You've got a 5-win streak in ranked match.
Round one. Fight! Round two. Fight! Final round. Fight!
the people I cared so much about. I wondered whether I should give up my dream of working for myself and play it safe by working for someone else in a job that would require me to put on a tie and commute every day. Though I knew that for me, taking less risk would mean having a less great life. Being so wrong, and especially being so publicly wrong, was painfully humbling. I am still shocked and embarrassed by how arrogant I was in being totally confident in a totally incorrect view. Though I'd been right much more than I'd been wrong, I had let one bad bet erase all my good ones. I thought very hard about the relationship between risk and reward and how to manage them. But I couldn't see a path forward that would give me the rewards I wanted without unacceptable risk. This kind of experience happens to everyone. It will happen to you. You will lose something or someone you think you can't live without, or you will suffer a terrible illness or injury, or your career will fall apart before your eyes. You might think that your life is ruined and that there's no way to go forward, but it will pass. I assure you that there is always a best path forward, and you probably just don't see it yet. You just have to reflect well to find it. You have to embrace your reality. Sometimes things happen that are hard to understand. Life often feels so difficult and complicated. It's too much to take in all at once. My deep pain led me to reflect deeply on my circumstances. It also led me to reflect on nature because it provides a guide for what's true. So I thought a lot about how things work, which helped to put me and my own circumstances in perspective. I saw that at the Big Bang, all the laws and forces of the universe were created and propelled forward, interacting with each other as a perpetual motion machine, in which all the bits and pieces coalesce into machines that work for a while, fall apart, and then coalesce into new machines. This goes on into eternity. I saw that everything is a machine. The structure and evolution of galaxies, the formation of our own solar system, the makeup of Earth's geography and ecosystems, our economies and markets, and each of us. We individually are machines made up of different machines. Our circulatory system, our nervous system, that produce our thoughts, our dreams, our emotions, and all the other aspects of our distinct characters. All of these different machines evolve together through time to produce the realities we encounter every day. And I realized that I was just one tiny bit in 1 nanosecond deciding what I should do. While that perspective might sound very philosophical, I found that it was very practical because it showed me how I could deal with my own realities in a better way. For example, I observed that most everything happens over and over again in slightly different ways. Some in obvious short-term cycles that are easy to recognize, so we know how to deal with them, like the 24-hour day. Some so infrequently that they haven't occurred in our lifetimes, and we're shocked when they do, like the once-in-a-100-year storm. And some we know exist, but are encountering for the first time, like the birth of our first child. Most people mistakenly treat these situations as being unique and deal with them without having proper perspective or principles to help them get through them. I found that if instead of dealing with these events as one-offs, I could see each as just another one of those and approach them in the same way a biologist might approach an animal, first identifying its species, then drawing on principles for dealing with it appropriately. Because I could see these events transpire in pretty much the same ways over and over, I could more clearly see the cause-effect relationships that governed their behaviors, which allowed me to develop better principles that I could express in both words and algorithms. I learned that while most everyone expects the future to be a slightly modified version of the present, it is typically very different. That's because people are biased by recent history and overlook events that haven't happened in a long time, perhaps not even in their lifetime. But they will happen again. With that perspective, I realized that what I missed when I mistakenly called for a Great Depression was hidden in the patterns of history. And I could use my newfound knowledge of these patterns to make better decisions in the future. And when I thought about my challenge, balancing risk and reward, I realized that risk and reward naturally go together. I could see that to get the most out of life, one has to take more risk, and that knowing how to appropriately balance risk and reward is essential to having the best life possible. Imagine you are faced with the choice of having a safe, boring life if you stay where you are, or having a fabulous one if you take the risk of successfully crossing a dangerous jungle. That is essentially the choice we all face. For me, the choice was clear, but that doesn't mean the path forward was without challenges. I still needed to face two big barriers that we all must face. I can't tell you which path in life is best for you because I don't know how important it is for you to achieve big goals relative to how important it is for you to avoid the pains required to get them. This is the courage I spoke of earlier, and we each have to feel these things out for ourselves. After my big mistake in calling for a depression, I had come to one of life's forks in the road, as we all do. If I made the choice to take a normal job and play it safe, I would have ended up with a very different life than the one I had. But as long as I could pay the rent, put food on the table, and educate my kids, the only choice for me was to risk crossing the jungle in pursuit of the best life possible. My big mistake in betting on a depression gave me a healthy fear of being wrong. In other words, it gave me deep humility, which was exactly what I needed. At the same time, it didn't stop me from aggressively going after the things I wanted. To succeed, I needed to see more than I alone could see. But standing in my way of doing that were the two biggest barriers everyone faces: our ego and blind spot barriers. These barriers exist because of how our brains work. First, let's explore the ego barrier. When I refer to your ego barrier, I'm talking about the parts of your brain that prevent you from acknowledging your weaknesses objectively so that you can figure out how to deal with them. Your deepest-seated needs and fears reside in areas of your brain that control your emotions and are not accessible to your higher-level conscious awareness. And because our need to be right can be more important than our need to find out what's true, we like to believe our own opinions without properly stress testing them. We especially don't like to look at our mistakes and weaknesses. We are instinctively prone to react to explorations of them as though they're attacks. We get angry, even though it would be more logical for us to be open to feedback from others. This leads to our making inferior decisions, learning less, and falling short of our potentials. The second is the blind spot barrier. Everyone has blind spots. The blind spot barrier is when a person believes he or she can see everything. But it's a simple fact that no one alone can see a complete picture of reality. Naturally, people can't appreciate what they can't see. Just as we all have different ranges for singing, hearing pitch, and seeing colors, we have different ranges for seeing and understanding things. For example, while some people are better at seeing the big picture, others excel at seeing details. Some are linear thinkers, and others are more lateral. While some are creative but not reliable, others are reliable but not creative, and so on. Because of how our brains are wired differently, everyone perceives the world around them differently. By doing what comes naturally to us, we fail to account for our weaknesses, and we crash. Either we keep doing that or we change. Aristotle defined tragedy as a terrible outcome arising from a person's fatal flaw. A flaw that, had it been fixed, would have instead led to a wonderful outcome. In my opinion, these two barriers are the main impediments that get in the way of good decision-making. Taking risks and occasionally being ruined wasn't acceptable, and neither was not taking risks and not having exceptional results. I needed an approach that would give me the exceptional upside without also giving me the exceptional downside. When I discovered it, it turned out to be my holy grail. To get it, I needed to replace the joy of being proven right with the joy of learning what's true. This need prompted me to seek out the most thoughtful people I could find who disagreed with me. I didn't care about their conclusions, I just wanted to see things through their eyes, and to have them see things through my eyes, so that together we could hash things out to discover what's true. In other words, what I wanted most from them was thoughtful disagreement. Going from seeing things through just my eyes to seeing things through the eyes of these thoughtful people was like going from seeing things in black and white to seeing them in color. The world lit up. That's when I realized that the best way to go through the jungle of life is with insightful people who see things differently from me. Think about the 5-step process I described earlier. As I said, because we are wired so differently, not everyone can do all the 5 steps well. But you don't have to do them all alone. You can get help from others who are good at what you're not, who are wired to perceive things you can't. All you need to do is let go of your attachment to having the right answers yourself and use your fear of being wrong to become open-minded to these other views. In this way, you could point out the risks and opportunities that you would individually miss. I found that taking this radically open-minded approach and believability weighting people's thinking significantly increased my probabilities of making the best decisions possible. This enabled me to ascend to greater heights and greater challenges. In the past, I would have always wanted to do what I myself thought was best. But now I sought out the strongest independent thinkers I could find. I still do. There is nothing better to be on a shared mission with extraordinary people who can be radically truthful and radically transparent with each other. This approach led me to create a company with a unique idea meritocracy, operating in a unique way that produced unique successes. In an idea meritocracy, you get the best of everybody. Everyone thinks independently. Then we work through our disagreements to get at what's best. However, not every opinion is equally valuable, and we had to learn to distinguish between good ideas and bad ones to get the best decisions. In other words, we needed to believability weight people's thinking. But that's another story I will explain in my work principles. Right now, there are many wonderful opportunities and dangerous risks surrounding you that you don't see. If you saw them, free of the distortions produced by your ego or your blind spots, you would be able to deal with them more effectively. If you could acquire this ability, and with practice you can, you will radically improve your life. So far, I described how I learned to confront my own realities, my problems, my mistakes and weaknesses, and how I surrounded myself with others who could do things better than I could. This was the most effective way I discovered for making great decisions. This is not the normal way of being, but through this approach, I became very successful. And being successful enabled me to meet extraordinarily successful people and see how they think. I've discovered that their journeys were similar to mine. You might not know it, but they all struggle, and they all have weaknesses, that they all get around by working with people who see risks and opportunities that they would miss. Over time, I learned that by nature, most people's greatest strengths are also connected to their most significant weaknesses. And striving hard for big things is bound to lead you to painful falls. It's just part of the process. Such setbacks will test you. They sort people. Some think hard about what caused their setbacks, learn lessons, and continue progressing toward their goals, while others decide that this game is not for them and get off the field. I've come to realize that success is not a matter of attaining one's goals. I found that when I reached each new higher level of success, I rarely remained satisfied. The things we are striving for are just the bait. Struggling to get them forces us to evolve, and it is this struggle toward personal evolution with others that is the reward. I no longer wanted to get across the jungle, but instead wanted to find greater and greater challenges to go after. Surrounded by great people, working together on a shared journey. Eventually, the success of the mission and the well-being of the people alongside me became more important than my own success. I also started to see beyond myself and wanted others to be successful when I'm no longer here. I realize that if I fail to do that, I will be a failure. I struggle with this now. We all struggle with different things at different times, until we either choose to give up or until we die and become part of the larger evolutionary story. This is how all machines work and are recycled through time. When a machine breaks down, its parts go back into the system to become parts of new machines that also evolve through time. Sometimes this makes us sad because we become very attached to our machines. But if you look at it from the higher level, it's really beautiful to observe how the machine of evolution works. Now you must decide for yourself how you will evolve. Forget about where these principles came from. Just assess whether or not they are useful to you and evolve them to suit your own needs. As with all of life's decisions, what you do with them is ultimately up to you. My only hope for you is that you have the courage to struggle and evolve well to make your life as great as it can be. Thank you and goodbye.
The following is a conversation with Ray Dalio. He's the founder, co-chairman, and co-chief investment officer of Bridgewater Associates, one of the world's largest and most successful investment firms that is famous for the principles of radical truth and transparency that underlie its culture. Ray is one of the wealthiest people in the world, with ideas that extend far beyond the specifics of how he made that wealth. His ideas that are applicable to everyone are brilliantly summarized in his book Principles. They are also even further condensed on several other platforms, including YouTube, where, for example, the 30-minute video titled How the Economic Machine Works is one of the best educational videos I personally have ever seen on YouTube. Once again, you may have noticed that the people I've been speaking with are not just computer scientists, but philosophers, mathematicians, writers, psychologists, physicists, economists, investors, and soon, much more. To me, AI is much bigger than deep learning, bigger than computing. It is our civilization's journey into understanding the human mind and creating echoes of it in the machine. That journey includes the mechanisms of our economy, of our politics, and the leaders that shape the future of both. This is the Artificial Intelligence Podcast. If you enjoy it, subscribe on YouTube, give it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, support it on Patreon, or simply connect with me on Twitter at Lex Friedman, spelled Fridman. This show is presented by Cash App, the #1 finance app in the App Store. I personally use Cash App to send money to friends, but you can also use it to buy, sell, and deposit Bitcoin. Most Bitcoin exchanges take days for a bank transfer to become investable. Through Cash App, it takes seconds. Cash App also has a new investing feature. You can buy fractions of a stock, which to me is a really interesting concept. So you can buy $1 worth, no matter what the stock price is. Brokerage services are provided by Cash App Investing, a subsidiary of Square and member SIPC. I'm excited to be working with Cash App to support one of my favorite organizations that many of you may know and have benefited from, called FIRST, best known for their FIRST robotics and Lego competitions. They educate and inspire hundreds of thousands of students in over 110 countries and have a perfect rating on Charity Navigator, which means the donated money is used to maximum effectiveness. When you get Cash App from the App Store or Google Play and use code LEXPODCAST, You'll get $10, and Cash App will also donate $10 to First, which again is an organization that I've personally seen inspire girls and boys to dream of engineering a better world. And now, here's my conversation with Ray Dalio. Truth, or more precisely, an accurate understanding of reality, is the essential foundation of any good outcome. I believe you've said that. Let me ask an absurd sounding question at the high philosophical level. So, what is truth? When you're trying to do something different than everybody else is doing, and perhaps something that has not been done before, how do you accurately analyze the situation? How do you accurately discover the truth, the nature of things?
Almost the way you're asking the question implies that truth and newness have nothing, are almost at odds. And I just want to say that I don't think that that's true, right? So what I mean by truth is, what is the reality? How does the reality work? And so if you're doing something new that has never been done before, which is exciting and I like to do, the way that you would start with that is experimenting on what are the realities and the premises that you're using on that and how to stress test those types of things. I think what you're talking about is instead the fact of how do you deal with something that's never been done before and deal with the associated probabilities. And so I think in that, don't let something that's never been done before stand in the way of you doing that particular thing. You have because almost the only way that you understand what truth is through experimentation. And so when you go out and experiment, you're going to learn a lot more about what truth is. But the essence of what I'm saying is that when you take a look at that, use truth, find out what the realities are as a foundation, do the independent thinking, do the experimentation to find out what's true, and change and keep going after that. So I think that the way that when you're thinking about it the way you're thinking about it, that almost implies that you're letting people almost say that they're reliant on what's been discovered before to find out what's true. And what's been discovered before is often not true, right? Conventional view of what is true is very often wrong. It'll go in ups and downs, and there are fads, and okay, this thing, it goes this way and that way. And so definitions of truths that are conventional are not the thing to go by.
How do you know the thing that has been done before that it might succeed?
It's to do whatever homework that you have in order to try to get a foundation, and then to go into worlds of not knowing. And you go into the world of not knowing, but not stupidly, not naively. You go into that world of not knowing, and then you do experimenting, and you learn what truth is and what's possible through that process. I describe it as a 5-step process.
Yes.
The first step is you go after your goals. The second step is you identify the problems that stand in the way of you getting to your goals. The third step is you diagnose those to get at the root cause of those. Then the fourth step is then now that you know the exact root cause, you design a way to get around those, and then you follow through and do the designs you set out to do, and it's the experimentation. I think that what happens to people mostly is that they try to decide whether they're going to be successful or not ahead of doing it, and they don't know how to do the process well because the nature of your questions are along those lines, like, how do you know? Well, you don't know. But a practical person who is also used to making dreams happen knows how to do that process. I've given personality tests to shapers. So the person, what I mean by a shaper is a person who can take something from visualization. They have an audacious goal, and then they go from visualization to actualization, building it out. That includes Elon Musk. I gave him the personality test. I've given it to Bill Gates, and I've given it to many, many such shapers. And they know that process that I'm talking about. They experience it, which is a process essentially of knowing how to go from an audacious goal, but not in a ridiculous way, not a dream, and then to do that learning along the way that allows them in a very practical way to learn very rapidly as they're moving toward that goal.
So the call to adventure, the adventure starts not trying to analyze the probabilities of the situation, but using what instinct. How do you dive in? So let's talk about.
It is being it's simultaneously being a dreamer and a realist. It's to know how to do that well. The pull comes from a pull to adventure. For whatever reason, I can't tell you how much of it's genetics and how much it's environment, but there's early on, it's exciting. That notion is exciting. Being creative is exciting. And so one feels that. Then one gets in the habit of doing that. Okay, how do I know? How do I learn very well? And then how do I imagine? And then how do I experiment to go from that imagination? So it's that process that one and then the more one does it, the better one becomes at it.
You mentioned shapers, Elon Musk, Bill Gates. Who are the shapers that you find yourself thinking about when you're constructing these ideas? The ones that define the archetype of a shaper for you?
Well, as I say, a shaper for me is somebody who comes up with a great visualization, usually a really unique visualization, and then actually builds it out and makes the world different, changes the world in that kind of a way. So when I look at it, Mark Benioff with Salesforce, Chris Anderson with TED, Mohammed Yunus with social enterprise and philanthropy, Jeffrey Canada and Harlem Children's Zone. There are all domains have shapers who have the ability to visualize and make extraordinary things happen.
What are the commonalities between some of them?
The commonalities are, first of all, the excitement of something new, that call to adventure, and again, that practicality, the capacity to learn. The capacity then, they're able to be in many ways full range. That means they're able to go from the big picture down to the detail. So let's say, for example, Elon Musk, he describes, he gets a lot of money from selling PayPal, his interest in PayPal. He said, why isn't anybody going to Mars or outer space? What are we going to do if the planet goes to hell?
Right.
And how are we going to get that? And nobody's paying attention to that. He doesn't know much about it. He then reads and learns and so on. Says, I'm going to take, half of my money and I'm going to put it in there and I'm going to do this thing. And he learns, blah, 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 blah. And he's got creative. Okay, that's one dimension. And so he gave me the keys to his car, was just early days in Tesla. And he then points out the details. Okay, if you push this button here, it's this, the detail that. So he's simultaneously talking about the big picture. Okay, when does humanity going to abandon the planet? But he will then be able to take it down into the details, so he can go, or let's call it helicoptering. He can go up, he can go down, and see things at those types of perspectives.
And then you've seen that with the other shapers as well.
And that's a common thing that they can do that. Another important difference that they have in mind is how they deal with people. I mean, meaning there's nothing more important than achieving the mission. And so what they have in common is that there's a test that I give these personality tests because they're very helpful for understanding people. And so I gave it to all these shapers. And one of the things in workplace inventory test is this test, and it has a category called concern for others. They're all having concern for others. This includes Mohammed Yunus, who invented microfinance, social enterprise, impact investing. Is Mohammed Yunus, received the Nobel Peace Prize for this, Congressional Medal of Honor. One of the Fortune determined one of the 10 greatest entrepreneurs of our time. He's built all sorts of businesses to give back money and social enterprise. A remarkable man. He has nobody that I know practically can have more concern for others. He lives a life of a saint. I mean, a very modest lifestyle, and he puts all his money into trying to help others. And he tests low on what's called concern for others, because what it really, the questions under that are questions about conflict to get at the mission. So they all, Jeffrey Canada, who changed Harlem Children's Zone and developed that to take children in Harlem and get them well taken care of, not only just in their education, but their whole lives. Him also concerned for others. What they mean is that they can see whether those individuals are performing at a level that an extremely high level that's necessary to make those dreams happen. So when you think of, let's say, Steve Jobs was famous for being, difficult with people and so on. And I didn't know Steve Jobs, so I can't speak personally to that. But his comments on, do you have A players? And if you have A players, if you put in B players, pretty soon you'll have C players and so on. That is a common element of them, holding people to high standards and not letting anybody stand in the way of the mission.
What do you think about that kind of idea? Sorry to pause on that for a second. That the A, B, and C players, and the importance of, so when you have a mission, to really only have A players and be sort of aggressively filtering for that.
Yes, but I think that they're all different ways of being A players.
Okay.
And I think in order to create a great team, you have to appreciate all the differences in ways of being A players. Okay?
Yes.
That's the first thing. And then you always have to be excellent, in my opinion. You always have to be really excellent with people to help them understand each other, themselves, and get in sync with them about what's true about them and their circumstances and how they're doing, so that they're having a fabulous personal development experience at the same time as you're dealing with them. So when I say that they're all different ways, this is one of the then qualities. You asked me what are the qualities. So one of the third qualities that I would say is to know how to deal well with your not knowing, and to be able to get the best expertise so that you're a great orchestrator of different ways, so that the people who are really, really successful, unlike most people believe that they're successful because of what they know, they're even more successful by being able to effectively learn from others and tap into the skills of people who see things different from them.
Brilliant. So how do you, when that personality, being, first of all, open to the fact that there's other people see things differently than you, and at the same time have supreme confidence in your vision? Is there just the psychology of that? Do you see a tension there between the confidence and the open-mindedness?
And now it's funny because I think we grow up thinking that there's a tension there, right? That there's a confidence, and the more confidence that you have, there's a tension with the open-mindedness and not being sure, okay? Confident and accurate are almost negatively correlated to many people. They're extremely confident and they're often inaccurate. And so I think one of the greatest tragedies of people is not realizing how those things go together, because instead it's really that by saying, I know a lot, and how do I know I'm still not wrong? And how do I take that, the best thinking available to me, and then raise my probability of learning? All these people think for themselves, okay? I mean, meaning they're smart. But they take in, like vacuum cleaners, they take in ideas of others. They stress test their ideas with others. They assess what comes back to them in the form of other thinking. And they also know what they're not good at, and what other people who are good at the things that they're not good at, they know how to get those people and be successful all around, because nobody has enough knowledge in their heads. And that, I think, is one of the great differences. So the reason my company has been successful in terms of this is because of an idea meritocratic decision-making, a process by which you can get the best ideas. What's an idea meritocracy? An idea meritocracy is to get the best ideas that are available out there and to work together with other people in the team to achieve that.
That's an incredible process that you describe in several places to arrive at the truth. But I apologize if I'm romanticizing the notion, but let me linger on it. Just having enough self-belief. You don't think there's a self-delusion there that's necessary, especially in the beginning? You talk about in the journey, maybe the trials or the abyss. Do you think there is value to deluding yourself.
I think what you're calling delusion is a bad word
Yes.
for uncertainty. Okay. So, in other words, because we keep going back to the question, how would you know, and all of those things. No, I think that delusion is not going to help you, that you have to find out truth. Okay. To deal with uncertainty, not saying, listen, I have this dream and I don't know how I'm going to get that dream. I mentioned in my book Principles and described the process in a more complete way than we're going to be able to go here. But what happens is I say you form your dreams first, and you can't judge whether you're going to achieve those dreams because you haven't learned the things that you're going to learn on the way toward those dreams. Okay.
Right.
So that isn't delusion. I wouldn't use delusion. I think you're overemphasizing the importance of knowing whether you're going to succeed or not. Get rid of that, okay? If you can get rid of that and say, okay, no, I can have that dream, but I'm so realistic in the notion of finding out. I'm curious. I'm a great learner. I'm a great experimenter. Along the way, you'll do those experiments, which will teach you more truths and more learning about the reality so that you can get your dreams. Because if you still live in that world of delusion, okay, and you think delusion's helpful, no, the delusion isn't. Don't confuse delusion with not knowing.
Yes. But nevertheless, so if we look at the abyss, we can look at your own that you describe. It's difficult psychologically for people. So many people quit. Many people choose a path that is more comfortable. That the heartbreak of that, breaks people. So if you have the dream and then there's this cycle of learning, setting a goal, and so on, what's your value for the psychology of just being broken by these difficult moments?
Well, that's classically the defining moment. It's almost like evolution taking care of. Okay, now you crash, you're in the abyss. Oh my God, that's bad. And then the question is, what do you do? And it sorts people. Okay, and that's it's
Okay.
like some people get off the field and they say, oh, I don't like this, and so on.
Yeah.
And some people learn, and they have they have a metamorphosis, and it changes their approach to learning. The number one thing it should give them is uncertainty. You should take an audacious, dreamer guy who wants to change the world, crash, okay, and then come out of that crashing and saying, okay, I can be audacious and scared that I'm going to be wrong at the same time. And then how do I do that? Because that's the key. When you don't lose your audaciousness and you keep going after your big goal, and at the same time you say, hey, I'm worried that I'm going to be wrong, you gain your radical open-mindedness that allows you to take in the things that allows you to go to the next level of being successful.
So your own process, you've talked about it before, but it would be great if you can describe it, because our darkest moments are perhaps the most interesting. So your own with the prediction of another depression,
Economic depression.
Yes, I apologize. Economic depression. Can you talk to what you were feeling, thinking, planning, strategizing at those moments?
Yeah, that was my biggest moment. Okay, building my little company. This is in 1981, 82. Yes. I had calculated that American banks had given a lot more money to lend a lot more money to Latin American countries than those countries were going to pay back, and that they would have a debt crisis, and that this would send the economy tumbling. And that was an extremely controversial point of view. Then it started to happen, and it happened, and Mexico defaulted in August 1982. I thought that there was going to be an economic collapse that was going to follow because there was a series of the other countries. It was just playing out as I had imagined. And that, couldn't have been more wrong. That was the exact bottom in the stock market because central banks eased monetary policy, blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't have been more wrong. And I was very publicly wrong and all of that. And I lost money for me, and I lost money for my clients. And I only had a small company then, but I had these were close people. I had to let them go. I was down to me as the last person. I didn't have it. I was so broke I had to borrow $4,000 from my dad to help to pay for my family bills. Very painful. And at the same time, I would say it definitely was one of the best things that ever happened to me, maybe the best thing from happened to me, because it changed my approach to decision making. It's what I'm saying. In other words, I kept saying, okay, how do I know whether I'm right? How do I know I'm not wrong? It gave me that. And it didn't give up my audaciousness, because I was in a position. What am I going to do? Am I going to go back, put on a tie, go to Wall Street, and just do those things? No, I can't bring myself to do that. So I'm at a juncture. How do I deal with my risk, and how do I deal with that? And it told me how to deal with my uncertainties. And that taught me, for example, a number of techniques. First, to find the smartest people I could find who disagreed with me, and to have quality disagreement. I learned the art of thoughtful disagreement. I learned how to produce diversification. I learned how to do a number of things. That is what led me to create an idea meritocracy. In other words, person by person, I hired them, and I wanted the smartest people who would be independent thinkers, who would disagree with each other and me well, so that we could be independent thinkers to go off to produce those audacious dreams, because you have to be an independent thinker to do that, and to do that not independently of the consensus, independently of each other, and then work ourselves through that, because who knows whether you're going to have the right answer. And by doing that, then that was the key to our success. And the things that I want to pass along to people, the reason I'm doing this podcast with you is, I'm 70 years old, and that is a magical way of achieving success. If you can create an idea meritocracy, it's so much better in terms of achieving success and also quality relationships with people. But that's what that experience gave me.
So if we can linger on it a little bit longer, the idea of an idea meritocracy, it's fascinating, but especially because it seems to be rare, not just in companies, but in society. So there's a lot of people on Twitter and public discourse and politics and so on that are really stuck in certain sets of ideas, whatever they are. So when you're confronted with an idea that's different than your own about a particular topic, what kind of process do you go through mentally? Are you arguing through the idea with the person, sort of present is almost like a debate, or do you sit on it and consider the world sort of empathetically? If this is true, then what does that world look like? Does that world make sense? And so on. So what's the process of considering those conflicting ideas for you?
I'm going to answer that question